All right, let's do this. We're about to jump into a musical time machine to figure out where the music we all know and love today really began. I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about where your favorite song comes from? Not just the artist, but its deep, deep, deep origins? Well, the answer is way older than you might think, and trust me, it's a wild story full of rule breakers, game-changing technology, and a whole lot of drama. So our journey takes us way back to what's called the early modern era. We're going to be looking at two huge periods that totally shaped everything we hear today. The Renaissance, which gets going around 1400, and the Baroque era, which kicks off right around 1600. These 350 years, they changed absolutely everything. First up, the Renaissance. Now, you got to understand, before this, music was, well, it was kind of rigid, super strict rules, especially in the church. But then, a new generation of composers showed up and started asking these massive questions, like, wait a second, what if music could be more than just rules? What if it could actually make you feel something? So, one of the first things they did was break away from just having one single melody. Instead, they got completely obsessed with this thing called harmony, which is just the magic of making different notes sound awesome when you play them at the same time. This was a total game changer. Music suddenly sounded deeper, fuller, and way more exciting. This led them to a brilliant idea called polyphony. I know, it's a fancy word, but the concept is amazing. Imagine a bunch of different singers, each with their own unique melody, all singing at the same time. But instead of being a chaotic mess, it all weaves together into one beautiful, complex piece of music. That's polyphony. And this wasn't happening in a bubble. A massive cultural shift called humanism was spreading across Europe, which was all about focusing on human feelings and experiences. Composers totally caught on and started using music to explore real emotions. They weren't just writing notes anymore. They were trying to capture pure joy or heartbreaking sadness in sound. The music got personal. And they came up with this really clever trick to do it, called word painting. The idea is as cool as it sounds. The music itself becomes a paintbrush, creating a sound that literally matches the words being sung. It's so simple, but so effective. If the lyrics were about rising up to heaven, what do? You make the melody go up, of course. If the words were about falling into despair, you guessed it, the notes would drop way down low. It was a direct line to the listener's emotions. Now, during the Renaissance, music kind of split into two different worlds. You had your serious music for the church, and then you had the fun stuff for parties and everyday life. Let's break that down. Sacred music, for church, was just massive. It was serious, prayerful, and designed to fill these gigantic cathedrals with incredible sound. But secular music, that was for the people. It was fun, you could dance to it, and the songs were about real-life stuff, like love and nature. And a huge part of that sacred church sound was that it was often performed a cappella. You've probably heard that term before. It just means voices and only voices, no instruments at all. The thinking was that the pure sound of human voices blended together was the most perfect and beautiful sound you could possibly make. Okay, so music is getting more emotional, more complex, but there was still one big problem. It was mostly just for the rich. But then, a single invention came along and completely flipped the script. Seriously, this was a revolution. Just try to wrap your head around this. Before the mid-1400s, if you wanted a copy of a song, someone had to sit there and write out every single note by hand. It took forever, and that made it ridiculously expensive. Having sheet music at home was a luxury item, only for the super wealthy. And then, boom, the printing press arrives. All of a sudden, you could print hundreds of copies of music quickly and cheaply. This was huge. Music was no longer trapped in palaces and cathedrals. It exploded out into the homes of regular people. It was finally for everyone. This quote here says it all. The printing press did for music back then what the internet and streaming have done for us today. It made it accessible, it made it shareable, it allowed musical ideas to spread like wildfire. So after the Renaissance, music entered this new, wild phase around 1600, the Baroque era. And look, if the Renaissance was about finding emotion in music, the Baroque was about cranking that emotion all the way up to 11. The motto was basically, go big or go home. The Baroque style was all about extravagance. The music was super dramatic, highly decorated, and full of fancy details. Composers loved huge contrasts, going from whisper quiet to suddenly loud. You get a strong, driving beat, And this is when we start to see the very first orchestra forming. And the ultimate go big art form was born in this era, opera. It started in Italy and it was a total spectacle. Think of a movie, but instead of talking, the actors sing every single word, complete with elaborate costumes, massive sets, and a full orchestra. Now, to make all this dramatic music, you needed better tools. So instrument technology exploded. Makers perfected the violin family, the violins, violas, and cellos we still use today. And the defining keyboard sound of the era was the harpsichord, which has this unmistakable bright, plucky sound. With all this new drama and new technology, it's no surprise that this era created music's first international superstars. I'm not kidding. These composers were the rock stars of their day. Let's meet the headliners. You had Claudio Monteverdi, a true pioneer of opera. There was Johann Sebastian Bach, an absolute genius whose music is so complex and perfect it's basically math. Antonio Vivaldi was a violin wizard. You've definitely heard his masterpiece, The Four Seasons. And George Friedrich Handel wrote these huge, epic pieces for royalty. Okay, so after this whirlwind tour of 400-year-old music, you might be asking, why does any of this matter to me today? Well, it matters a lot more than you might think. The foundations they built are everywhere. The harmonies and chord progressions in your favorite pop songs, a lot of those were figured out back in the Baroque era. That epic, dramatic music in a movie action scene, that's pure Baroque influence. Even the core of a modern orchestra is still built around the instruments they perfected, like the violin family. And that leaves us with one final, fascinating question. The music of Bach and Vivaldi has lasted for centuries. So what music from our time, what song, what artist, what genre, do you think will still be captivating audiences 400 years from now? Something to think about. Thanks for listening.